Chapter 9 about the cell cycle. We're going to focus with Chapter 9, the cell cycle with mitosis, body cells making new body cells. So when I hear cell cycle, I automatically think of mitosis, and mitosis is a part of the cell cycle. Mitosis is going to be where the genetic material in the DNA divides, but the cell cycle is defined as from when it's initially formed, not actively dividing, through mitosis, the nucleus divides, and then eventually we'll have two cells. That entire process is what the cell cycle is. Again, we're just focusing on body cells for this chapter. So why does a cell need to divide? So we know off the top of our head, common sense, that cells just need to reproduce. So whether we're talking about single cell eukaryotic cells like the amoeba that's being shown on the right with a letter A where it says reproduction, that needs to divide and make new amoebas. Another reason would be, if you look at B, a fertilized egg. So you have initially one cell, and then it's fertilized, and it needs to divide and divide and divide and divide to make what we are, multicellular eukaryotes, with, again, meaning our cells are very complex. And then finally, if you look at the picture C, those are two bone marrow cells. So bone marrow is responsible for making our red blood cells, which have to be made by, I believe, I'll have to look, but by the millions, because we go through the turnover for blood cells is a very large number. So just to renew what's in our blood takes place all the time. So when you see the word genome, we are talking about the cell, an entire cell's genetic information. So all of the DNA put together, whether it's one strand of DNA, like in a prokaryote, there's one, not as long as ours, but one single chromosome or DNA strand, and that would be the prokaryote's genome. Or talking about like us, we are multicellular. We have many strands of DNA in the nucleus of our cells. So whenever there's more than one, again, the cell's typically complex. That would be, again, the eukaryotic genome, all the different chromosomes or DNA strands in the nucleus. So giving an example of different types of eukaryotes, we have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second. A mouse has 40 chromosomes, and a fruit fly has 8 chromosomes. Okay, before we get into 9.2, we need to understand and remember the difference between a lot of words that can be really confusing. So on this slide, I couldn't really draw, so I drew like this really long oval. That would be a chromosome before it is duplicated. Now, as mitosis, the separation of the nucleus, okay, before we get into 9.2, we need to understand and remember the difference between a lot of words that can be really confusing. So on this slide, I couldn't really draw, so I drew like this really long oval. That would be a chromosome before it is duplicated. Now, as mitosis, the separation of the nucleus takes place, the DNA that's condensed, called a chromosome, it needs to duplicate or replicate or copy itself. So if you look at the picture from the microscope of DNA, again, DNA, our macromolecule, again, that holds our genetic information, it gets copied. Now, again, the whole thing is a chromosome. DNA makes up the chromosome. But we could also say that it's chromatin. Now, what is the difference? Chromatin is the loose version of DNA when it's kind of thrown about, just kind of hanging out within the nucleus. When mitosis is about to start, it condenses with the proteins. Proteins help to get it close together. When it's close together, it is called a chromosome. Now, that's not just it, of course. When you look at the picture, you will see the word or words sister chromatids. There is along the top. It's almost like this is an X, but laying on its side. There's a little piece and a long piece across the top. That would be the before picture of a chromosome. It duplicated, so now in the bottom of that picture, we have another little arm and then this long piece. So when the chromosome has been copied and they're still attached to one another, they're called sister chromatids. Now, what are they attached to or attached by? They're attached by something that we call a centromere, and that would be a different kind of protein holding the two chromosomes together. Again, they have to be identical, or they should be identical. Or we could say the centromere is holding the two sister chromatids together. Again, the confusing thing is you can say it a bunch of different ways and still be saying the same thing. So if we look at the picture on the right, you can see that this fake cell is starting with one chromosome. And now in the second cell down, or second nucleus down, you can see that now it's been copied. Maybe it looks similar to an X. That's sometimes how it's drawn. And again, we still say that's one chromosome because they're attached to one another, but it's made of two sister chromatids. And then when the nucleus divides down at the bottom, each cell has one chromosome that should be identical to what the parent cell had, or the starting out cell had. Here is going to be a comparison of the two types of cells that are in our body. So we have somatic cells, which are body cells, so our skin cells, liver cells, heart cells, brain cells, normal body cells. Gametes are sex cells. So when you see gamete, the only two types it can be talking about are egg or sperm cells. So again, somatic body cells. Something else that you need to know about somatic body cells. Sometimes you are going to see a number written with a letter, like 2N. Somatic cells are considered diploid cells. Di means two, and our normal body cells have basically two copies of DNA, one from mom and one from dad. So they have two different types of each chromosome. So body cells are, they have a diploid number, and again, the process by which these cells, as I had already mentioned with the past few slides, they divide by mitosis, or the cell cycle. Humans have, again, a diploid number of 2N and 46 chromosomes, or we could look at it like 23 pairs. Gamete cells, again, different. They only have half the DNA, because eventually through reproduction it's going to join up an egg and a sperm cell to make a person. So the person is going to need a full set. So these cells have half our DNA, basically. What that is called is a haploid cell. So when we write this with the letter N, N stands for the number of chromosomes. The sex cells only have one of each type of chromosome for reasons that I just said. Their process is called meiosis or meiosis. The proper way to say it is meiosis. Humans have a haploid number, or 23 chromosomes in their gamete cells, egg or sperm.